Hi everybody. I'm going to make a low impact video today. If I do it this way, it involves almost no editing. But I want to give you a background story on this Flakvierling. This Flakvierling was captured at Schießplatz Meppen, near Meppen, Germany. It was a Krupp corporate artillery range, about 15 miles, 20 kilometers long. And it's where they tested big naval guns and stuff. The fact that this gun was there, I figured it had to be there in a defensive role. But after contacting the Krupp Corporate Archives and being answered back in less than 24 hours by Friedrich von Holzbach Krupp himself, that there was no flak there in a defensive role. They had a plan to do it in 1942, but never followed through on it because they figured it's an artillery range. They were shooting at it already. What could the Allies do that they weren't already doing themselves? So it was captured there. It was probably there in a test role, firing ammunition to test against armor or test new types of armor piercing ammunition. That would explain why the gunner seat was removed when I found it, because it's difficult to get in and out of the gunner seat on this thing because of the how it's designed. But if you remove the gunner seat, then you could just walk up behind it, reach out with your toe, and fire the gun with one of the foot triggers. So that may explain why the gunner seat was removed. It also explains why the Flakvierling 40, the analog computer, was still in place, because when the order came down through the military to remove that and put a blockout plate there, when the analog computers and electronic compensating sites were removed from service, the reason this one still had it was because it wasn't in the military. It was in the hands of a civilian corporation as a test weapon, probably. So that would explain that. But how did it get to my garage in Michigan? That is a great story. Um, there's a famous Canadian author. You can see him right here next to me. His name is Farley Mowat. Very famous writer. A lot of his books turned into movies. His greatest work, possibly, is a book called Never Cry Wolf. He's a great conservationist and naturalist, just an all around great guy. But he got bored easy, and God bless him for it. Uh, he was in the Canadian Army in World War II, and Italy, North Africa for sure, Italy, I believe so, and definitely Northern Europe in France and Belgium. Um, at the end of the war, he was bored, and he pitched an idea to the Canadian High Command that they create the first Canadian museum collection team. And he was, of course, in charge of it. And it was about a dozen guys in Farley, Captain Farley, Mowat. And when they wrote up his letters authorizing him to find all these war trophies that he had pitched, this is what we needed to do with his collection team. Uh, when started, he saw the loophole in the document and he massively overshot his authority. I wouldn't go so far as to say he stole a Liberty ship, but he essentially stole the Liberty ship in a port. He told them, when that ship's empty, it's mine. They said, "Who are you, infantry captain?" And he showed him his letters from the Canadian High Command. And they said, "Yes, by all means, fill the ship." So he and his team started collecting everything: vehicles, uniforms, small arms. The catalog of stuff they crammed into that ship is astounding. Um, one of the items being my Flakvierling. One of the other items being the Flak Panzer IV Whirlwind that's being restored at Base Borden. Sturmgeschütz that we worked on, a chunk of the torsion bar here, with the dates that we worked on it painted on it. I can't seem to get away from Farley Mowat. Uh, we have a lot in common. We're both writers. We both love Old English sheepdogs. He said they're just a great haystack of a dog, and it's the best assessment I've ever heard. But we also had an interest, apparently, in German military hardware. And because of that common interest, this Flakvierling is now in my garage. How I got it out of Canada. There's a base where they had a ton of this stuff stored. literally a big fenced-in area. Then there was World War I items, World War II items, all rusty. And the new base commander took over, and all he saw was a very untidy, not very military-like storage area on the base that was full of just rusty bits to him. So he had a scrapper come in and remove a bunch of it. Fortunately, not all of it was scrapped. One of them being this Flakvierling, and on the same location, I also found the Oberlafette and mount and everything for an early production single gun Flak 38. But the great thing, because Farley was the one grabbing all this stuff, Farley was a writer, Farley was a record keeper, and he tracked every piece he found it, where he found it, who found it, what time of day it was, usually what day, where they were. So that's how I know mine came off of the Meppen firing range. We know the vehicle dump that the Flak Panzer IV came out of. We know what area it was in. Uh, Very rare to find pictures of a Flak Panzer IV in a vehicle dump at the end of the war. I've been looking for a couple of years and have been able to find any, but that's how we know what we know about the items. The single Flak 38 I had came off the roof of the Valentine U-boat works in Bremerhaven, Germany. The Hetzer that the base Borden Museum has came out of that same hoard. It's a real Hetzer, not a G13. So that's how we know the history and how it ties everything together. But it also ties us to Farley Mowat. It also ties us to all those guys who went around Northern Europe with Farley Mowat, picking up stuff that just looked different or just looked interesting. Not sure what their criteria was, but one of the best stories, if you read a book he wrote called My Father's Son, and it's all the letters back and forth between he and his father during the war. Both really smart guys. I would have liked to have sat down and had a drink with those guys. They're pretty funny. And above the back, about 25-30% of the book is this story of all these items being grabbed out of Northern Europe and shipped back to Canada. By the time the High Command found out how far he had overshot his authority, the ship was already back in Canada and being unloaded. But one of his greatest capers was he stole a V-2 rocket from the British. Now, the British had told all the Commonwealth countries that if you run across any emerging technology, special radios, radar, rocketry, jet engines, anything like that, the British government owns it, so turn it over. And Farley Mowat didn't agree with that in so much as he really wanted one of those V-2 rockets. Well, the British had a long train, many cars going down, and it was loaded with V-2 items and other war booty. But the track curved, and the last couple cars couldn't be seen from where the main guard shack was. And Farley approached the guards with some alcohol and got them to imbibe and got them all a little tipsy and a little sing-songy. All the while, at the far end of the train, Farley Mowat's boys moved one of the cars, unloaded the V-2 rocket onto a miniature submarine trailer, placed a wooden conning tower on it to make it look like a two-man submarine, and then took it back to their base. The British didn't find out about it until it was already in Canada. But and there's a great deal of photographic evidence showing it in Canada, all the way up into I believe sometime around 1960. It sort of disappeared. It was in Western Canada and just sort of disappeared. A lot of people believe it's buried uh, in a specific location. I'm not going to divulge what I know, but they believe that, and they're trying to get permission to dig there, but the property had been government property, is now private property, and the new owner won't let anyone dig. But if it's there, I hope they get it. I hope they get it. It's a piece of Canadian heritage, and it needs to be on display for the people of Canada to see what. It's one thing to talk about fighting the Germans or fighting anyone in a war, but when you see what we were up against with their technology, it really changes the perspective on how hard our guys had to fight. uh, to gain any ground or win that war. Their guns were great, their sighting, their radar. They just always seem to be right at the cutting edge of technology. And when you say, there was 20 of them and 20 of us, but two of those guys had a gun that fired 25 rounds a second, and five of them were in a Tiger tank, it changes the perspective of the battle a little bit and the history and how we tell that story. That we weren't just fighting one of the largest, best equipped, best trained, best disciplined militaries in the world. We were doing it sometimes at a great disadvantage. But with all these artifacts, we can tell that story. I'll always tell the story of Farley Mowat and how this gun came to be in Michigan. When it travels around, I'll tell the story of the Canadian soldiers that captured it, uh, that we never forget their names. So that's how we're tied to the base board and restoration team and their Flak Panzer IV project with a whirlwind, one of only two in the world. And this last weekend, they were here for 3 days measuring parts of my Oberlafette and some other parts that have rusted away on the gun mounted in the whirlwind because mine was sitting outside in a cold, dry climate. It basically only has surface rust. There's really no penetrative rust on the heavy steel. Some sheet metal type items have penetrating rust on them, but the Oberlafette and everything is solid. Um, now you can't quite see them in this shot, but the bearings for the Oberlafette and the Unterlafette and the elevation and everything are in functioning condition, which is kind of crazy. But because the gun was trapped in the turret of the whirlwind and debris from trees and everything could collect in there and hold water, the bottom about 3 inches of their Oberlafette all the way around is rotted either away or severely. So they were here this weekend measuring, but they were also noticing because all five known Flakvierlings in North America, all made by Osmarkwerk, you can literally see a very clear evolution of design, starting with mine being the oldest known one out of all the existing ones. Uh, but you can really see in the same year the huge jump forward in design from this one to the one in baseboard and the Flak Panzer IV. So the guys were really excited because when you see this Oberlafette, literally everything is unbolted from it. It is as naked as the day it was born, and it's going to start going back together soon. But to be able to see these two, to see a flak feeling taken down completely to its smallest components would be rare at any time. To have two of them in the same condition at the same time is mind blowing that we have each other as references for missing parts or what should this piece look like. The best part is not only do we have them both apart, they're 5 hours drive time apart. Toronto is 5 hours that way, where the Flak Panda 4 is. They drove down, hung out, we had dinner and stuff for a couple days and just had fun. And they made a stack of drawings. I keep telling them to save them all because one day we'll be able to walk into a fabrication shop, say, "Here, build one of these," and we'll get back a Flakvierling. But so that's the story of where the project came from. Where it's headed is it'll be used in World War II reenacting here in the States on a provisional basis. But wherever it goes, I will tell the story of Farley Mowat. I will tell the story of his crew and all the cool stuff they grabbed and crammed in a ship like pirates and sailed back to Canada. But the funny thing is, the ship got to go back to Canada. They didn't. Um, but I will always tell the story of where it came from and how I came into my hands, and I'll never forget the guys that got it. And we all owe all Canadian and Allied soldiers a debt of gratitude for the things that they did. and the fearsome weapons they faced while doing it. But I'm starting to wax poetic, so that means I should probably stop talking for a while and go lay down. But so I hope the information on the background of these vehicles and equipment helps, and to sort of frame it in time and see where it came from. Um, but I hope you enjoyed the story and I had fun telling it. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And have a good night.